Thank you for being there. Now let's begin talking about telecoms at 20, the economic impact. I've been joined by an economic analyst, the person of Dr. Usaze Iyura. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Blessing.
It's my pleasure as always.
Now
let's talk about telecoms at 20. Now before the coming of GSM operators, the various network providers that we have today, before that time, there was telecommunication in Nigeria, but it was owned by the government, run and operated by the government. We're talking about the defunct NITEL. Yes, at that time, just very few persons owned telephone lines, and it was strictly fixed. It was landline at that time. And then 20 years ago, during the administration of more President Olusegun Obasanjo, we had the GSM companies come into Nigeria. At first it was one, and then we had another, and so many others came into the sector. Now you know the rest of the story. And to date, we still have GSM operating in Nigeria, via which so many persons can have access to internet on their phones. Now, over the last 20 years, how have the telecommunications companies in the revolutionized telecom industry performed?
Yeah, they have performed very well.
Okay.
Yes, the telecom sector has most likely been a reference point now. Most times when government wants to put up a new policy, especially privatization policy, the reference sector is the telecommunication sector. You know, here, when they were to privatize the power sector, it was the telecom sector that was the model. If it worked there, then it should work in other sectors. So they've performed well. We know how it was before the GSM network operators came into the economy. You know, then you want to make a call, you will see a long line of queue, like you want to buy for, only for you to see that it's just calls. You see people go to one wealthy man's house to wait for calls for hours, and you know, so that was the situation. You have rainfalls, night wire for you have to go to their office 1 week. So that's also, we all experienced it before. In 2001, the Obasanjo administration threw open. I think what made this telecommunication model more successful compared to the power sector is that NITEL was actually scrapped. Totally. It was not like scrapped totally, you know, just like when you're in your offices, the management says they want to scrap whatever is, you know, they sell it out completely. Okay. They are not leaving it and saying somebody should come and inherit. So it was scrapped. So these telecommunication network operators came and started with their own equipments all over. Okay. You know, their right of way, digging the ground and bringing all their equipment. So it was like a brand new zero level, ground zero level. And so that's why, for me, it has succeeded, unlike the power sector where they inherited NEPA and transmission, and there were agreements that they would change it. Disco said they would provide meters and so on, transformer, but it didn't work. So that's a story for another day. But I think the telecom sector has done well. In the last 10 years, they've been the largest or fastest growing sector in terms of contribution to GDP over the last 10 years. And even during the pandemic, I think they were only the sector that posted positive growth, or not just positive growth, but very high positive
because
rates.
A lot of other sectors dependent on them.
Exactly. Okay. So they were the go-to sector. And, you know, so they've done well. Their contribution to GDP in the last 5 years has been double digits. 10, 12%, you know, so on a scale of 1 to 10, they've been like 6, 7. But the point is, after saying all the advantages, yes, subscriber base, they have about 100, and the last NCC report in October said they have about 184 million subscribers for the voice calls. Then for internet users, about 100 million subscribers. Yeah, they've done well, as I said, but there are still a lot of untapped potentials in the telecommunications sector. Very, very
if
huge.
They have 100 million subscribers for internet in a country where you have over 200 million people, it means that's half the market's taking over.
Exactly.
And then for voice calls, there's still
even that 184 is good to clarify the fact that it doesn't mean 184 million people. Okay. So it means I could have 4 lines.
Okay.
So it's a duplication. I could have 4 lines, and inactive lines are all included.
Okay.
You know, the NCC statistics that they released in October showed that about 52.7 million lines were inactive as at September.
So that even brings it lower.
To as 130 something million. And you know, so as I said, 2-3 people, one person having 2-3 lines. So we can't place an exact figure. But when you consider the fact that I remember when the House of Assembly, National House of Assembly was carrying out their hearings on this, what do you call this, electronic voting. Okay. When they invited NCC to justify or make a report, and NCC said it's just about 40% penetration in the country that they have. So I think that gives the story. It tells us that it's about 40-50 million people. Considering, and that's true, considering the fact that another serious untapped potential is the fact that the rural dwellers have not been captured. There's hardly any, just 9-4 here, I go there very often. From 9-4, you hardly have any, just only one, without mentioning that you can have skeletal network. Okay. Even places like... So you don't have the
general coverage for all areas?
They don't. Okay. They don't. So, and so considering that, it has effects on not just GDP, but the welfare of the people too. Okay. So at the point where you see countries like Ghana, the rural penetration of telecommunication is about 80%.
That's massive.
Yeah, it is. And that's why you have this mobile banking very successful in Ghana. When you go to Ghana, the percentage of people who use the regular banking compared to those who use mobile banking, they call it Momo. Okay. Momo. The percentage is higher with the mobile banking because of this rural penetration into of the telecommunication networks. So you know, there was a way the government went about it in Ghana. There was a fund or a policy they called GIFE, where telecommunications networks, along with the government, there was a common pool where they pool funds. Government had its own share of the funds, and beyond those funds, governments could also assist with site acquisitions, with a right of way. You know, they have to pay. You don't just come and you start digging the ground. You see when you have to pay for it. So government gave all those waivers, custom waivers, because that's a serious problem for most of these network operators. Okay. When you check the MBS statistics, it shows that investment, foreign direct investment into the telecommunications sector in 2019 was about $942 million. That's close to $1 billion. Okay. And by 2020, it fell to about $432 billion. So that's about 55% drop. So it shows that there has been a reduction in investment. And that's why you see most of, I was listening to the telecommunications operators union or so, their president was saying that, and a very impactful constraint they felt has been the dollar, the foreign exchange rates, because almost all their equipments are imported, you know, from their servers to, there's nothing that is produced here. And that's where an opportunity comes. As I talked about, the potentials that are open for creative Nigerians who could, I know most of these, you see their servers, they are gigantic, they are mass. So we might not be able to produce the software, the components inside, but I think the cabinet, the cabinet that encloses it is something we can produce here, so that even if we are not saving dollars completely, at least we are reducing our forex on those cabinets, even on software, on the software provision of those software, ICT, instead of having to import everything. So I think that's a potential that we as Nigerians can exploit, but it depends on, it will also bring us back to the operating environment, because manufacturing, you know how it has to do with power and so on. But sometimes I wonder, we have politicians who are very, very rich. So I wonder why we are not investing in areas like this.
Sectors that support the telecom industry by way of manufacturing some of the things that they need.
Exactly. Instead of just putting money in Swiss banks and so on, these are very, very high import, high revenue earning areas where we could. And it also brings us to the rural telecommunication penetration that we're talking about, because you see that you need the technology is expensive for the telecommunication. That's why we talked about Forex. So having to import those very heavy duty equipments taking it to the rural
area
areas
where you may not have
where
much
your revenue,
usage.
exactly, your revenue returns. The average investor would only invest in areas where he has high revenue returns. So you put it there, then you are running on power. There are communities like Abudu, very nice town. In like 4 years, they've not had land. This is authoritative. There are some areas, 1998, you hear complaints, they've not had light. So even in the city centers, you have this telecommunication. You see there are masts. There's always a standby generator where you see people coming to put diesel almost every 2 days. So that's in the city center. So you have to take this to the rural areas with the expensive gadgets. Then you have to run these generators, and you are not sure of what the returns are. So that's where you really need government collaboration. And as I said, it worked in neighboring countries, Ghana. So
it can also work here.
Exactly. So you do all those right-of-way exemptions, customs and waivers for most of their imported equipments. Then you see financial development comes in, financial inclusions. So you could even have these rural dwellers transacting directly with their foreign customers who come to buy their goods, because they can do transfer online.
Okay,
they don't
there's
need to
internet access provided for them.
Exactly, with their phones, they can do all these transfers. Then even the banks will not go there, because this is not the era of where you use notebook and do debit and credit. You have your servers. You don't need much physical presence. Exactly. So as a bank, you need your servers, your laptop. So you also need telecommunication. So on a scale of, as I said, they've done well, but there are still a lot of untapped potentials that we could get maximally from this telecommunication, because primary products is called primary products for a reason. Primary, it just does the word basic. So when we are dealing with agricultural products, cassava, yam, oil, there's a reason why it's called primary. So you go to secondary production, which is all the manufacturing we always talked about. Then services, and that's where telecommunications comes in. And that's the revolutionizing that we are having in the global economy now. Services is the way to go. You look at economies like the UAE, Dubai, and so on. They were a primary dependent economy on oil, but you see they've moved. This oil is just like a startup. It provides your raw capital you need to invest in other sectors. So you have Dubai now they are majorly a service economy. I was reading of one insurance company in Dubai where they have their staff strength alone is 140 million people. Just a single insurance company. And their ICT sector, they have about 2 million in just the ICT. So services is a way to go. So if we could open this telecommunications sector very well, government collaborates with them, because really I think we academicians, elites, and government, we are almost so obsessed with GDP growth. We are always talking about growth. But in economics, you have economic growth and development. So most times we seem to ignore the development aspect of it, and that's where it affects the citizens. That's why you meet
and the development overall would translate to the growth that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So welfare and well-being of the individual. So when you look at development, you are now watching out for their well-being, welfare. So you are not ostracizing the rural dwellers. You are looking out for his welfare, and that's where government should be interested, not just in growth, GDP, 400 and something trillion GDP. When you divide it by the population, what's the per capita GDP? So at that point, I think we should concentrate on development, and that's where the citizens are important. That's why you tell the average man, even not the average man, a professor in probably biochemistry, not an economist, tell him GDP is growing, we have 400 trillion absolute numbers, we are growing at double digit, and it's not excited, yeah, because purchasing power is still. Why? Because he is interested in development, which measures standard of living, measures cost of living, quality of life. So I think that's where government should collaborate with these telecommunication networks and include the rural dwellers. I think there's deep untapped potential there that we could benefit from.
You talked about the challenges faced by telecommunications companies. We also talked about their potentials. Now let's look at, I know you've scored them very high in terms of performance. Let's look again at performance and even service provided. Now over the years, once they started, to purchase a line, a cell phone line then was very expensive. It went as high as 20,000 Naira and even beyond just to get a line. Now this day, for you to get a SIM card is almost free. Now that's some development over the time. But it seemed like the cost you would have, what you would have spent acquiring a SIM card, you now spend for airtime and other things. So people still complain about the high cost of subscription for data, the high cost of airtime in Nigeria as compared to other climes. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and that's where regulation comes in. You know, we have a problem in Nigeria of regulation and implementation.
Okay.
So we have almost given these private investors a free day to just operate. You know, I like the point you made about airtime. You know, there are some countries, UK and some other countries, there's a point where a private investor, especially in telecommunications industry, has operated for a while, has broken even, made his profit back, made his cost back. So they give like 5 years. And I think those were the issues that we did not iron out at the point of privatizing the sector. You know, I think some documents were not well executed, but whatever the case, I think those are points where you now say after 5 years, 10 years of making profit, then you reduce your airtime. There are some countries that after breaking even, 5 years profit, calls are now free. So what just happens is that you just have adverts going during call. So while you are making a call, you just have an advert coming. You know, so that's where they now make money. On campus, there are some countries that you have campus, it's free data service. So probably in Uniben, probably you have data services free. So
maybe
I
like
think that's
free
where
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, yeah, that's the point. So I think that's where government comes in, regulation and implementation of that. So that these people are regulated and they are made to know that at some point you have to reduce your data, you have to reduce your, because most especially like MTN, we know they sold lines at 30,000, 25,000 when they came. So the call rates are still very high, to be very honest. Our data level is still very high. It's still very high, yeah. And their penetration, the NCC statistics show that just 37% of Nigerians enjoy 4G networks. So most of their networks are still, most of them had infrastructure for voice calls. So they've not improved on it. So it's almost jammed.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to service provided by telecommunication companies to Nigerians, even as they mark 20 years of operations in Nigeria after this break. Okay, we've been talking about the revolutionized telecommunication industry in Nigeria at 20. Now, GSM operations started in Nigeria 20 years ago, precisely in 2001. Now, I still have my analyst in the house, the person of Dr. Saze Iyua. And before the break, we were talking about quality of service offered by the telcos. Now, we've talked about the high cost of airtime and data subscription. What about the quality of service? You're making calls sometimes. The line is breaking. You can't actually hear clearly. And there are some days when there'll just be interruption. You can't get connected on some network or from one network to the other after 20 years. Yeah,
it's in fact on Wednesday it happened to one of the networks from about 7 to like 1. There was no network. Their network bar was off. So it's a problem, you know, and that's where I said regulation comes in, because these private investors, they are here to make profit. So that's where government has to watch out for its citizens, and that's where I talked about development, not just growth. Development which has to do with citizens' welfare, and I think that's where our government has not been doing enough, bringing these people to order, checking them. But as for the part of quality of service, I think most of them have, the truth is most of them came to this country with infrastructure for voice calls. You know, so added to that now, 3G has come to join the voice calls, 2G, 4G, e-payment networks, all these are e-payment platforms, Zoom calls. So most of these are now still running on the voice call infrastructure that was with just very minor improvements on their technology. So the total investment we had was about, in these 20 years, had been $68 billion. That's still very small for a sector that you expect should be providing for almost 200 million people. So I think the quality of service is still low because of the infrastructure, which was mainly built for voice calls. So all the other 2G, 3G, 4G e-payments have come to sort of choke that very basic infrastructure. So it's leading to the interruptions that we face, and that's where I think government should come in, put markers for these telecommunications networks, talk to them about their call rates, their quality of service. Then, you know, I think regulation should really come in.
But again, can the regulatory body, which is NCC, Nigeria Communications Commission, can they actually regulate in terms of letting the telcos know or giving them a limit to which they can charge for airtime and subscription and demand for improved service, given that for some complaints of the telcos, they seem not to be attending to some of the complaints. We're talking about the usage of 3G and 4G, but there is 5G now, which globally the world is upgrading to. And now there's a disagreement between the federal government and operators of the industry over the proposed cost of the 5G spectrum, which the telcos say is too high, but the NCC insists it is fair. Now, against that backdrop, do you think that it is possible for the NCC, which is a regulatory body, to insist on improved service delivery when the side of the telcos do not seem to be taken into account?
Yeah, I think it's neither a yes or a no. On the part of government, government has also abdicated its role in most of the support systems that it should provide for them. They are running on generators. They are having to source their own forex. They've asked for a special window with CBN. They tell you that they have to source for forex in the black market. So they will definitely transfer all this cost to their airtimes and everywhere they can get it. So you can't really now bring regulations that they should make calls free at some level and impact on the data network. So you see countries like South Africa, where MTN is from, calls in some locations are free, data in some countries, because you could say, okay, government has provided infrastructure, lights and everything. So I think government has failed in some of its roles, so it's difficult for them to enforce it on them. But at the same time, this telecommunication, on the flip side, have also made enormous profits during this period. They've reaped enormous profit that you can't quantify. So at that point where I had 75 billion for the 5G network, I think it's something they can afford. But at the same time, since regulation is a problem, we've had issues about, anyway, let's not bring the bribes and so on. So I think at this point, it's neither here nor there. I think these guys, the telecommunication networks are able to if they want to. But government has also failed in most of its responsibility. It's also difficult for them to enforce it on them. So it's difficult to place who should blink first, whether it's the NCC or, but at some point I think the NCC should show more sternness and because they've made profits, enormous profits. So there should be a point of a time now when their CSR or their corporate social responsibility should come in now and now start providing all these beyond quality of service at cheap rates.
Particularly for the rural areas.
Exactly.
Okay, now there's a school of thought that competition forces improvement in what you offer your consumers. Now, it seems like there isn't much competition in the telecom communication sector. We just have very few players. Some persons think that if there is stiff competition, each service provider would just have to up their game.
That's another point. But you know, the telecommunication sector is a very highly capital-intensive sector, very, very capital-intensive. Everything is imported, you know. So, and as that was what I was mentioning, that why our wealthy Nigerians, especially the politicians, why are they not coming into sectors like this? Just that we know that the telecommunication sector is an oligopoly market, you know. When you look at the oligopoly market structure, basic economics, they tell you there's restriction to entry. There's usually a market leader. There's price fixation of prices. So the market leader usually fixes a price and all of them go along with him. There's collaboration, you know, and there's, because of the high capital intensive nature of the oligopoly market, so there's a way they always collaborate to make entry very, very restricted. So that's one of the characteristics of the oligopolistic market structure. But for me, I think because of the capital intensive nature and the forex and other issues that come into it, I think that's why investment has been low. But I think domestic investment has no excuse why they shouldn't come into this sector. That's local. The foreigners, you could expect that, yes, of recent FDI has dropped in the country 15% in the last 2-3 years. So because of insecurity, power, so you can understand why FDI is not coming. But why our domestic wealthy are not coming
into a sector as lucrative as this.
I really can't say. Yes,
well, we just hope that the next 20 years for Nigeria will better in terms of telecommunications. We hope for improved services, and we also hope for better regulation that will bring about quality service to every Nigerian who makes use of telecommunication.